A little distant.
It could just be Google Meet.
A little distant.
A little emotionally distant.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that's just.
Squad. Who among us?
Cool. Well, how was everybody's 9/11?
I was going to do that. I had a great 9/11. I obviously watched footage of the collapse all day long. I watched a lot of, I call them fan videos, but that's not the right word for them.
9/11 fan cam.
There's an incredible, if you're really to totally ruin your YouTube algorithm, there's an incredible amount of amateur video from the day.
Sick.
That is really brings it to life in a way that the news footage does not.
Wow.
And then I stayed up till like 3 a.m. working on my race car.
How's that going?
Yeah.
Wow. That's really starting off with the tough questions here. It's not going great, I'll tell you that. Spent so much more money than I would have ever conceived of spending on this thing. I'm supposed to race it next weekend, and it does not run currently. I don't know if the engine runs at all. I've never seen it run. It came on a pallet from Japan with no oil in it. So it turns, I know that. And I think most of the stuff that I need is in the garage currently. So it's theoretically possible, but I'm doing a lot of late nights and like drinking Red Bull at, 8 o'clock?
Yeah.
Because then I'm going to be up for another 4 or 5 hours.
Cheers.
Dang.
Yeah, it's going great. Very stupid, totally unpredictable. At every stage of this, even when I felt like I was way ahead, I knew, like I could picture this period in my head, that it was going to come down to me like half-assing things to get them done at the last possible minute. And here we are. You gotta know yourself. Last night, I have to build a transmission tunnel. And last night, my friend Frank was over making custom headers from scratch.
Wow.
So the car was up on a lift, so I couldn't get in to make the transmission tunnel. So instead, I decided to clearance the brake calipers with an angle grinder so that I could fit one of 3 sets of wheels that I have currently. In the process of doing that, probably breathed in conservatively a pound of aluminum dust. So
That sounds like my job. Sick.
yeah.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Cool.
I get an ad. Do you get this ad on Instagram now that's like, do you work with metal at home or at work? The University of Michigan would like to study your brain.
Finally.
You're an ideal specimen.
I assume it's for a good reason that they want to study my brain. They want to be like, we want to see why you're so smart.
Exactly. Only really smart people. It's kind of a self-selecting
Yeah.
group
Yeah.
that end up working with metal.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I assume the metal is doing something good to my brain, and that's why they want to look at it.
Yeah. It's like there's nutrients in there. Like iron is a vitamin, and so it's good for you to get metal in there.
That's what I'm assuming.
Yeah.
I sometimes feel like angle grinders should almost be illegal. You know? I mean, it seems like one of the most dangerous things that that you can just go to a store and buy for a pretty low, it's a low entry point.
I don't know if you looked into this, Peter, but there's a whole bunch of dangerous shit you can go to the store and just buy, pretty much whoever you are. Angle grinders definitely are among the more dangerous things, but there's some other stuff you can just go buy. Anyone can go buy if you're like a...
Sure. Well, I mean, at least they should have a warning or something. I mean, most of the really dangerous things, like you either have to fill out some paperwork or you have to be a certain age or You know what I mean? Or, it comes with a Surgeon General's warning.
For sure. I think the angle grinder though is like there's like a often a delta where it's like the usefulness of a tool, like how much potential it has to change your life and how dangerous it is. And like the most dangerous tools are also the most useful tools. And there's
Yeah.
in most cases, it's like as you get closer to that most dangerous level, you also get most useful. I remember when I was building our Lemons car the first time. I was trying to cut springs with a sawzall, and I called my cousin and I was like, "Hey, I gotta I gotta cut these springs. Can I bring them over to your shop?" And he's like, "Do you have an angle grinder?" And I was like, "Oh." And I went to the store and bought an angle grinder, and it was like, "Oh God, like I can do anything now." Like it was like a moment of like I can literally cut any object in my life, whatever, whatever. And I can cut concrete, I can cut stone, I can cut steel, titanium, whatever you want. Just cut it.
Yeah, I think you mentioned this on the Auto Week podcast, talking about like I
Yeah.
had a sawzall, and someone else was like, "You're not using an angle grinder."
Yeah.
Was this the Lemons car that caught on fire, or a different one?
Yeah, no, that's the one. It's the one that I've now spent like $30,000
Sick.
turning into an equally useless race car.
Awesome.
The $30,000 Lada.
It is the most well done. You know, I was thinking the other day that there's a famous episode of Top Gear where the guys buy a Lada and they send it to Lotus Engineering to like make it faster for this guy, and they like put a coat of paint on it and change the suspension around and like put a hotter carb on it, and really I don't think do a ton else, maybe wheels and tires, and they're like, oh, your lap time came down by like 10 seconds, and I want to find that car and race it on a track with my car.
Yeah.
I think it will finally prove my long-standing suspicion that I'm better at building cars than Lotus. At least better than at building Ladas.
I would take that bet.
tuned by Rory.
Yeah.
Tuned by Rory Carroll. It's like when the Isuzu Impulses had the tuned by Lotus badges on them.
Yesterday, Frank was in there, and I was cutting those brake calipers with the grinder, and he's like, "You should have a mask and goggles on." And I was like, "I literally just watched you like lay a bead on this exhaust with a welder with no gloves and no helmet on, no." I was like, I didn't even know you could do that. I didn't know that. I thought the welder wouldn't work if you try to do that. Like, he's just over there, just totally like eyes open, just like,
Yep.
it's like, like I said, I didn't know you could do that. I thought you'd go blind, and maybe he will, but
Maybe.
it's shocking.
This is good enough eye protection at work, so it's probably fine.
I watch guys in El Salvador welding on the front end of a truck, like in the street,
Yeah.
with like nothing. Just like, holy shit.
I learned to weld on YouTube, and I did not know that you could do that.
Well, learn something every day.
That's yeah, man. Totally. Good sentence. Thank you for that.
What did you guys do on 9/11?
Oh, on 9/11, that was yesterday, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I scrolled, I saw some funny stuff online, and that was kind of the extent of my 9/11 festivities. I sent you guys those funny, things that I found.
Those are some good ones.
Been working on some songs, and other stuff. Yeah, that was mine. What about you, Maddie?
I went to work, and then I think like I chased the cats around and cleaned, and that was like my fun 9/11.
Cool. is this the podcast, or should we start it officially, or
Yeah.
because I obviously this is a practice episode 0. We'll see how whether we end up doing something with it or not. But I want to hear about Goodwood, and I want to tell you guys about, what do they call it even? I always just call it the Watkins Glen Festival, but it has some longer name. Rory and I did car stuff this past weekend.
The Watkins Glen Automotive Renaissance Fair.
Well, I mean, that was the joke I was going to make about Goodwood, right?
That was the joke I made about Goodwood to Rory.
Okay.
A lot of people have been making that joke about Goodwood to me recently.
I mean, it feels like the obvious thing, right? I mean, it's just, people dress up. I mean, it's a historical reenactment event.
Yeah,
basically.
It's weird. So Goodwood has like 3 big events. Goodwood is an estate owned by a guy named Charles March, who's now like the Duke of something, Sussex, recently elected. Just joking, but he inherited the place as is the kind of rule when he was 30. And it was kind of like in shambles, but back in like the immediate post-war era, it was a big spot for racing in England. It was very famous. They shut it down in, I think, the late 60s and focused on horse racing because the previous Duke or whatever, his dad, was big into horses. But it's a massive estate, probably like 2 hours from London, and it's really pretty. I mean, it's beautiful land, and they do like bird hunting and all kinds of stuff there. They have Rambling Manor, which is like always, at least like the one time I've been inside it, it's like one of those houses that's like halfway under construction, halfway really nice, and like halfway like melting away.
Right.
That's the famous 3 halves of a house.
Yeah, naturally.
Is it like a castle?
It's a house. I mean, I guess you'd say it's a castle-ish, but it doesn't have any like defenses or anything. Like it's an old manor house, but it's massive. I mean, it's funny when I pulled up the first time into the property, we pulled into the back, and there was this house that was like massive and very stately, and one of the most incredible looking houses I've ever seen. And I was like, oh, is that where the Duke lives? And they're like, that's the kennel for where they keep the hunting dogs.
It's the literal dog house.
It's literally where the dogs.
House of the dog.
It was in kind of rough shape, and there's a famous story when the Duke took it over and started the Festival of Speed, which was like their first big event. They invited Carroll Shelby. They were a few years into the event, and they invited Carroll Shelby, and he decided to come. And he was there with his wife. I don't know what number wife it was, but they were staying in the Duke's house, and woke up in the morning and pushed the call button for breakfast to be ordered to their room. And the Duke, not wanting them to know that they didn't have any staff in the kitchen, just made breakfast himself and left it outside the door without ever telling him that it was him.
Wow.
But since then, it's become like a super successful event. So Festival of Speed was the first one, which is literally a hill climb up the Duke's, you'd call it his driveway. That's a lot of modern cars trying to set a fast time, kind of set a record going up the hill. There's the members meeting, which is people who are members of this very exclusive club. They come and race cars door to door. And then there's Revival, which is
the Renaissance Fair.
Yeah. And I'm not like a dressing up kind of guy in that sense. Like I don't mind getting dressed when it's appropriate, but the idea of like putting on period clothing is really tough for me. It's just, and especially like being that way for days at a time.
Yeah, the cars and cosplay vibe is kind of brutal.
Yeah, and you're supposed to wear.
Did they make you talk funny?
No,
thank God.
No, thankfully, Americans existed at that time, so my accent is very correct.
You're allowed to use modern slang.
Yeah.
They're not going to throw you out for saying a car has swag or something.
No, they would probably like to, but no, it's like 100,000 people, and pretty much everyone is dressed in 40s, 50s, and 60s clothing. I thought I had a hack where I could just wear a t-shirt and jeans because those existed in those times. But you have to wear a tie to get into certain areas, so I had to put a tie on.
How many different outfits did you bring?
Well, I'm glad you asked because I wore the same thing every day.
Sick.
I just changed my shirt.
Good.
Yeah.
I have like a shawl collar sweater that Peter, you've probably seen before.
Yeah.
And I wore that with the shirt and tie, which is period correct, but didn't require me to like get all tweeted out. But I have to say, like,
No, I saw a pic of your fit on
yeah,
your Insta, and you didn't look like you were trying too hard. It wasn't costumey, but it was enviably just like appropriate and without being fussy about it.
pretty normal clothes. I mean, I think my thing with it is I don't enjoy the dressing up part of it, but a lot of people do. And so, like, I don't want to ruin their experience by showing up with like,
Right.
uh, whatever, a pile t-shirt or shorts. Yeah, I mean, the racing there is so good that literally if they were like, there's not a lot of things I would not wear to go see racing like that, like to see the cars going on the track and see the drivers. And I mean, it is mind-boggling, and I think it's been a long time since I've been there. This is my first time in a few years. And I wouldn't say I forgot about it, but I forgot how good it is. And I think like I remember the first time I went, I said, this makes like Monterey Car Week feel like the local like Culver Show and Shine. And I think like it is unfathomable how fun it is to watch these cars that you see. Like maybe you'll see them at a Concours, maybe you'll see them at like the Salon Privé or whatever, going and trying to win races with real pro drivers. And I think like if you've been to the Monterey Historics, which probably most listeners have not been, that's like the fanciest American vintage racing weekend, and it's a bunch of rich guys who own these really incredible cars, and they're all driving themselves and trying not to hit anything, trying not to damage their cars, and trying to like set respectable lap times. This is like better cars for the most part, and the owners will hire a pro driver to go try to win the race. And if you as an owner are not fast enough and decide that you want to drive your own car, Lord March can say, no, you're not driving. Tom Christensen,
Yeah.
winningest Le Mans driver, is driving your car. And it just makes for some incredible, I don't know if a lot of these cars were this fast in period. I think like setups,
Yeah.
tires, fuel, and then the quality of the driver, it's like a hyper real version of vintage racing.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because the whole time that I was at the Glen, and I always when I hear about Goodwood and read about it or watch videos or whatever, just over the years, I've always kind of like, I have my little reverse snobbery,
Yeah.
attitude about it. And I was and the whole time I was down in Watkins Glen, and I was just kind of thinking about talking about this and just and like well, I'm sure it'll be great or whatever, and I was sending you those funny photos or whatever, and
Yeah.
and then I noticed at some point over the weekend that like on YouTube they stream all the racing, and so I started watching some of it, and it was just like, oh holy shit. Because it's just like, I mean, it's everything that you're talking about, but the additional thing, like, okay, of course, it's just this insane panoply of cars, right? Because the thing is that it's like 40s, 50s, and 60s cars. Is that the span? Do they have anything before that or no?
No.
Okay,
Actually, no. There are some. Let me see.
they're like pre-war stuff too. I can't
Yeah,
remember.
which are like, There's the Goodwood Trophy is cars from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and that's one where like the cars definitely were not that fast in period because the motors are running in a higher state of tune, but they run period size tires. But if you go
Right.
touch them like in the pits, you can
Yeah.
like squish your finger into them. They're so hot and sticky. But those cars are up on three wheels, drifting through every corner.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. Is that the so you have just like this insane selection of just like the raddest, coolest, rarest, most valuable, but also like you have all these like poster cars that are just the cars that everybody knows. But then you have all these just like pretty obscure things too. But like you say, they're racing, and the track, like the nature of the track. I mean, just from what I can see from watching it, not having been there, it seems it's like a really high speed track. Like it's all, there are no like tight corners. There's like one chicane and like a couple of like slower corners, but there's nothing that's really slow. Like pretty much like it's just like these long sweeper corners. And so the cars are just fucking flying. And and it's not like watching racing now where it's like there's no ground effects, there's no, there's nothing pressing these cars to the ground. There's not like the insane mechanical grip that you get with just like, these tires that are like a foot and a half wide or whatever. These things are all running on old, tall, high aspect ratio tires, which means that they're tall and skinny, right? And so the amount, like when you watch them going through a corner, like you say, like drifting, lifting, the inside wheels, in the front or the back, depending on what the setup is. But they're also like the cars are just visibly moving around so much and so dramatically. And it's just wild to fucking watch these guys. And like you say, I mean, it's like Tom Christensen, Jimmy Johnson, like these guys from all these different disciplines of racing. I mean, it's really interesting from that standpoint too, because you always wonder, it's like, well, what would today's drivers be able to do with, with an old car, like when you play the kind of the bar, the bar room games of like, would X driver, would Michael Schumacher, be as good as Juan Fangio or Sterling Moss or whatever. And it's like, well, here's Jimmy Johnson in a Cobra, in like a 1963, 289 Cobra, just sending it, and it's just like, and you could tell they're having so much fun. And and you realize just like, look, I mean, I love racing now. I love watching sports cars, and you really have to kind of know, like, I feel like for the casual observer, like you really have to spend some time watching cars going through corners or braking or whatever to kind of learn how to read a car, and see like how comfortable it is or whatever. But it's like, with these things, with these cars from the 50s and 60s, you don't have to know anything. You could be seeing this for the first time and just be like, holy shit, this thing is just like on the ragged edge, and watching them actually racing and going side by side through corners where it's like they're both just like bobbing and jostling and just sliding and just like touch. And touch, and it's just like, this is the wildest shit I've ever seen. And it's like, okay, you win, dude. It's like no contest. It's freaking crazy.
And that's the thing about like the Goodwood thing is it's like, it's easy to be like, oh, these guys are like a bunch of like rich perverts. And like, yeah, in many cases they certainly are. But the action and like the degree to which the event is like produced, it is like, it's really hard to argue with it. And I feel like, again, it's like on paper, it's something that I would hate. And it's like,
right.
And I think like even festival is like so big and commercial and like, it's easy to imagine like, and it's like, okay, it's at a state of a nobleman or whatever. And it's like,
right.
But you get there and it's just like, God damn, they really know how to do it. And it's just undeniable. And it's like you said, there are 100,000 people there, people pressed against the fences, watching the racing happen, people like crawling all over the car. It's just like, if you don't like golf or you're not a golfer or whatever, and I would imagine if you go to the Masters, you're like, oh, this is pretty cool. Like, even if you don't care about golf at all or don't like golf or whatever, like I could see this being like the motorsport version of that, or like going to whatever, the Super Bowl, where you're like, oh, this is just an overwhelming experience, where it's like Indy 500 is one of those things where it's like the degree to which this is an event is subsuming all of my natural inclinations to dislike it.
Right. Yeah. No, I could totally imagine that. What's the access like? I mean, I assume you were there in some sort of VIP capacity, but I mean, can a punter can you get into the garages? Can you see the cars up close? I mean,
Yeah, and that's the cool thing about it too is for all the like production and like how kind of fancy the event can seem, like if you're a VIP, every step you take, there's someone handing you a glass of, Veuve Clicquot, or some kind of food that you've never heard of before. But um, it's not a super expensive event to go to, especially like compared to like a Monterey week. Um,
Oh wow,
you
interesting.
have incredible access. I mean, like
Huh.
the one thing that is pretty private is the immediate staging area where they stage the cars before they go on the track, and then the drivers club where the actual drivers can go hang out and take a shower or whatever. Those are
Mhm.
pretty shut down. If we just bought tickets and went, we could do all the other stuff. So you can go in the pit, you can go really close to the cars. I think one of the crazy things about it too is that like at the Monterey Historics or Motorsports Reunion or whatever they call it, you're on a real track, like a modern track, and there's Armco.
Right.
You're taking photos through a chain link fence. You can't
Right.
stand very close. You're in kind of like grandstands and all that stuff. This is like a chest high fence that is just like a piece of wood, and that's it. And
Yeah.
and there's the cars. So the racing is very immediate in that sense. I mean, I think like if you look at like my Instagram or look at anybody's Instagram, like you can steer really close and like there's nothing really separating you from the cars, which you kind of wonder how long they're going to get away with that.
Yeah.
But it is like it's a different experience as far as what you smell and see and hear from the track. But I think like that's what's cool about it is, and they make a big point of saying like we want this to be accessible. We want people to get close and smell things and like touch things, and easy to imagine hating it, but it's really hard when you're there. It's a really special thing.
Yeah. Yeah. What was the what was the coolest thing that you saw, like either a specific car or like particular race, because they do a bunch of different races, and it's kind of like by era, right? So they have like
So the big race, there's Ford Water, which is like production based GT cars from 55 to 60,
Mhm.
which is where you have like the big Ford Galaxies and the Minis,
right.
Alphas, and all that stuff, which is like,
Yeah.
you know, if I were to build a car to go to Goodwood, haha, I would love to have a Galaxy because they look so fucking
Dude,
hilarious on the track.
the beginning, the very beginning of, because I watched that race live as it was happening, and the beginning of it, it was like the front row was like a couple of minutes, because I think they qualified in the rain or whatever, so there it was a couple of minis on the front row, and the like the first Galaxy was like, a row or two back, and when the green flag dropped, that dude just like went straight up like basically just like clearing everybody, just shoving everybody to the side, and just
Yeah,
it just looked like the burliest, like just most obnoxious, ugly American thing like
yeah.
that's ever happened. It was so funny.
I mean, they look like they're deliberately trying to like eat the minis.
Totally.
There's a purple one, Purple Galaxy, that was just like the perfect race car to me.
Yeah.
So that one is probably like my favorite, but the RACTT, which is like closed cockpit GT and prototype cars from 60 to 64. So that's like
Yeah.
E-types, Cobras, the Vitsarini, the Corvette, the Stingray.
Yeah.
Like that is just we were sitting at the exit to the chicane, and the cars, if that chicane wasn't there, those cars would be flat out like around the entire track.
Yeah.
But coming out of that chicane, they have to slow down, and they pitch the car in one direction, slide through the chicane, and then drift back out, and like everyone
Yeah.
slides
Yeah. Literally sliding.
and like into the grass or like
Yep.
and it is just intoxicating. Like it is so cool. And I think like one of the differences too between this is just reminding me like of our hospitality, but one of the things that differentiates the revival from festival, both are very nice, but festival they build all these structures that are like period structures. So like the cafeteria is like the officer's mess that is like looks like a whatever military base mess hall.
Mhm.
The drivers club is like a library, like a wood paneled library with like books and like the globe and like the crystal, and like it looks like a nice hotel, or like the interior of a really nice period home. But it's all the next day. It's all packed up and put away. It's all
Hmm.
like flat pack. It's all like
Wow.
filler stuff that they build this little world out of. And it's like it's pitch perfect. Like every single thing is like perfectly executed. You can't tell it's fake. You can't tell it's like constructed for the event. And then the next day it's all gone.
Wild.
It's so it's so crazy. And it's one of those things too where it's like, not to like get on a tangent with this stuff, but I think like in America, you go to a lot of these events and like for whatever economic reason, there's like a shabbiness to it where it's like I like that, where it's like it's kind of fun and shitty in a way. Like the facilities are bad, or like the bathrooms are always wet, the floors are always wet in the bathroom, or whatever. Where it's just like
Right.
it's kind of like ramshackle and like barely hanging on, except for like a few facilities in the United States. Like that's the sense that you get. And this is like the absolute opposite end of the spectrum. It's like if Disney World was about racing instead of, not that I've been to Disney World in 30 years, but it's what I imagine. But it's like every single stitch is like, is right, is just pitch perfect. It's a really, not to mix metaphors, but it's a really strange experience coming from like American motorsport.
Yeah.
Goodwood, it's pretty good, man. I hate to say it. Wish it wasn't. I wish it wasn't so cool, but it is. They really,
God damn it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Would be a good
Well,
place to hunt pedophiles though. If you were gonna go snooping around trying to find some weirdos, bet there are quite a few of them there. A lot of helicopter traffic, if you know what I mean.
yeah.
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 How's the Glen?
The Glen was cool. So the this event that happens, it's one of my favorite car things. Um, and it's something that traditionally happens. I think it's the first Friday after Labor Day is how they schedule, and it's usually uh, in conjunction with I think it's the SBRA vintage races that happen at the racetrack, Watkins Glen track racetrack proper. But the Friday before that, they do this festival in the town, and the story with Watkins Glen, if you don't know, is that this was kind of the cradle of post-war sports car racing in the U.S., or one of a few, and this little this tiny little hamlet at the southern tip of Seneca Lake in central New York. It's just this little town, and at some point in the late 40s, some local guys convinced the local you know the local authorities to let them do this road race around the town, like on public roads, and they ran it for 5 years, and it was a huge success. And there were a ton of like really cool, like Briggs Cunningham was a big figure, at that time, and so he ran his cars, and there were all kinds of like really cool historic, one year that Cadillac Le Monster that ran at Le Mans was there as like the pace car, I think. But yeah, lots of just like completely rad stuff. Inevitably, there were a few accidents and some people got killed, and finally a kid got killed, and so that was kind of the end of that. But there was enough momentum that they they set about like building a proper racetrack kind of outside of the city or town. But anyway, so what this festival on the Friday before the vintage races is basically kind of like not so much a recreation, but just commemorating that history. And what they do is it's just this thing that like people just come from all over, and they just bring just the most insanely random assortment of cars. And the whole town is just completely overrun, you know, and they have a bunch of, you know, there's like a small concours d'elegance, and there's like, you know, there's like a gymkhana autocross thing set up, and there's, you know, there's a bunch of different lots, but basically it's like all day long there's different car clubs just doing kind of, you know, exhibition laps around the original course, which goes down the main street of town and then kind of goes back into the countryside and into this kind of hollow that is part of the this state park that's adjacent to the town. And that's like the coolest spot because you can go back there, and like, whereas, you know, on the, you know, in downtown there's, you know, a million people milling about, and you know, the crowds are pretty intense, but you can just drive, you know, the 5 or 10 minutes to the back part of that course, and just park, and especially there's like this one part where there's just like these kind of forested S's where the cars just go up this hill after, you know, crossing a bridge at the furthest point, and there's just nobody around, and you can just like climb up on the berm of, like, you know, this you know, like of the woods basically, and just like watch these cars go by and basically pretend you're Jesse Alexander, you know, like the you know, like post-war photographer guy, and just like, you know, just have these cars like come like screaming past you, you know. And I mean, you know, but it's like that's also kind of the part of the course where there's no cops, there's nobody around, so it's like a lot of people are just kind of tiptoeing around anyways, but you know, but you'll get guys, you know, in a something fast, and they'll kind of let the traffic clear out and then just kind of rocketing up the hill, you know. It's awesome. But it's this really cool, fun event. And the thing that happens, like, so what usually happens is, you know, that stuff is going on all day long, and then towards the end of the day, like sometime like around late afternoon, a bunch of the competition cars will drive over from the track, and they'll bring them into town and park them on the, you know, on that main street downtown, and just park them for, you know, for a couple of hours so you can get, you know, see them up close, and then like as evening is falling, those cars will do a few kind of exhibition laps around this old course, and the thing that's amazing about it is and the thing, the way I've always described it to people, and I try to explain what makes this event so special, is I mean, obviously I haven't been to Goodwood, and I completely trust you and believe that, yeah, that's like the raddest shit ever. But I have been to Monterey, and Monterey is incredible, but it's almost like there was a part of my brain that, like, at some point you're just oversaturated, you know. There's so much just, you know, $1 million machinery everywhere you look, and it's that kind of thing where it's like, you know, like the year that they had like all the GTOs, all the Ferrari GTOs in the world, you know, like they made 36 of them, right? And they've got like, you know, all but 2 of them on the lawn, you know, at Pebble Beach or whatever. And it's just like, you know, at some point your brain just kind of goes, like, you can't absorb it, you know. It's just like, all right, well, yeah, there they all are, cool, you know. And the thing is, there's nothing like that here, right? Like, this is just like, but every year there's something just completely astonishing. And like, you know, there was the one year that like somebody had a 917, you know, there for the, you know, martini liveried Porsche 917 from the, you know, from the early 70s. And seeing one Porsche 917 driving through the woods on a public road,
Yeah.
when there's nobody else around, is so fucking shocking. Like, it's genuinely stunning, you know, where you just go, holy crap, you know. Like, how on earth, you know, is this happening? How is this real? um, and and I feel like pretty much every year that I've gone, there's always been like at least one thing like that where it's just like just jaw dropping. Like holy shit! One year there was this Ciata, which was this kind of short lived Italian Etzerini uh, uh, mark in the from the 1950s, and these Ciata cars are just they're exquisitely beautiful. They're tiny, just like these tiny little um, like they like 1500 cc, or I don't even know, but one year there was one of these coupes, and I'd never seen one of these coupes before. And again, I mean, this is like a car that they built a handful of, like there aren't more than a handful of them that ever existed, let alone now. And this thing was just so unbelievably cool. I could not walk away from it, and it was just parked. Like I kept like walking away and then coming back, walking away, coming back. Last year, they had the what was it called? It's the General Motors, the Harley Earl LeSabre.
Mm-hmm.
So this was a show car, like a 1951, I want to say, show car. And I've seen pictures of this car like all of my life, like since I was, like since I got into cars, like as a 12-year-old. It's just this icon, because it really it was this Harley Earl was the kind of the father of head of General Motors design, and kind of the father of just industrial design, of American industrial design in a lot of ways, but he built this car, he designed and built this car, and design cues from this car ended up like in everything that subsequently came out of General Motors, like all through the 50s and into the 60s. And seeing, and so General Motors brought this show car down to, for this thing, I guess because it was like the whatever anniversary of the Corvette, or Corvette was the featured mark last year, and so it was just kind of an excuse for them to bring this car down and say, well, this car basically inspired the Corvette, which and seeing it in real life was really startling, because it was so much smaller than I always imagined it to be, like because the proportions ended up finding their way into all of the, like the big
Cadillac.
Oldsmobiles and Cadillacs and that stuff. But it's like when you see this car in real life, it's actually it's very low and very small, and it's much more kind of Corvette scaled, which was really interesting. But that was another car that just like it just completely mesmerized me. I was just so bewitched by it. Anyway, this year, because of the Olympics, and because of the NASCAR race usually happens. The NASCAR race at Watkins Glen usually happens in the window that the Olympics took up this year. So that got moved to, I guess, this weekend. And as a result, they had to move the vintage races back. So point of that being that this year there were no vintage races happening concurrently with the festival event. And I was really curious to see like how that would impact, because it's usually, a ton of people come from all over, and basically everybody in the town turns out for this thing. So I wondered, like, is this not going to be as big a deal this year? And honestly, with the exception, I mean, the only difference that I noticed was just the absence of like one of those just, oh my God, cars that are usually there in conjunction with the race, the vintage races, the historic races happening. But there was still a ton of really cool, really interesting, obscure and weird, fun stuff, and people wise, I mean, it was as big as it's ever been, which was nice to see. And and I what did I send you pics of? That there was the as things that I thought, well, Rory's not going to see this at Goodwood. Uh,
Fiero.
there was well, it was a boxer. It was I mean, I've gotten used to seeing the Fiero GT40 and 308 conversions, but this was a fairly faithful Ferrari 512 boxer um, reproduction, and faithful enough that, like, when I first saw it, I thought, oh shit, somebody brought a boxer, kick ass. And it was only when the crowd cleared a little bit, and I was just like, okay, no, those proportions are are
I will
whack.
say, and this is something that people don't know a lot about Goodwood Revival, is I did see some fake cars. Uh,
Oh, I was gonna ask that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so the story that I got was that if you own the real car, you can enter a replica, and it's
Right.
not if like a Boxster or like a Fiero based replica. It is a
No.
nut and bolt recreation, period materials, period techniques. It
Right.
has to be the exact same car. So you can have a $50 million car and race the $1 million recreation of it.
Right.
Mhm.
However, that did open up the door to a lot of people to cheat pretty heavily. And I think like, you know, there's only so much that a scrutineer can do looking at a car visually from the
Yeah.
outside, especially a car you're not going to threaten to cut up or take apart. Um, and Adrian Newey has an E-type Jag there that is like mega cheaty. And like,
Oh yeah.
Really?
so Adrian Newey is the former technical director at Red Bull. He's pretty widely considered to be like the best aerodynamicist ever to work on a car.
Right.
He has won championships
Yeah.
at Red Bull um, and really created some incredible, ingenious ways to cheat the wind. His personal car is, like I said, mega, mega cheaty. There are a number of cars that are also cheaty. I think almost all of them are making more power than they would have in period,
Sure.
um, which led Lord March to, before the event, put out an Instagram address, which like it's not super long. The audio is out there, and he's sitting at a desk in a brown suit. He's always very well dressed. I got to give him that. For a nobleman, I mean, he really looks good. But he's sitting at his desk and gives this hands crossed, very like school principal, school headmaster speech to camera, where he threatens people for that they'll get thrown out if they cheat and they get caught. And there's like a point where they like it's not a zoom because it's one camera, but
Uh-huh.
it like so it cuts from like a 10-foot shot to like a extreme close up, and it's just his shoulders and head, and he says something like make no mistake, you will quite literally be sent home. And it's like we'll kick you out. Like you can't stick around and watch the race if you get caught. We're going to kick you out. And you can just imagine the guys in the pit being like, is he talking about me? like like what? Yeah, it's I think it's pretty flagrant again because it's like NASCAR or like sports car racing, whatever, you get caught like if you have a car that they're suspicious of, they're gonna pull it apart and like they're gonna find out if you're cheating. Um if you use, a half a teaspoon too much fuel or whatever. But these cars are like they're not getting cut up and they're just passing a visual inspection and it's
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
like
There's no template. They can't they don't have like the laser ball
laser.
that they scan the car with, to
Yeah.
make
So
sure it's within the parameters.
and I think like it's interesting too to look at cars that have previously competed at Goodwood when they go for sale. So like you can look at sale
Mm,
listings of the cars and they'll be like, this has, 570 horsepower or whatever. And you're like, well, in period, it was supposed to be making 265. So it's
right.
like something's going on in there. Somebody figured this out, but um, that part of it is interesting. And that's what, like when I was saying earlier, like I think the drivers, um, I wouldn't say they're more skilled, but I think just more is known about driving than was known in the 50s and 60s.
Hmm.
Um, and then I think like tire technology, like we just know more about how to
Yeah.
set up a car, even if it's the same stuff. You know how to set up a car differently, and we know a lot more about making power. So like all the external dimensions, materials, whatever, can be the same or visually the same, but it is kind of a different car, and it is kind of a different like. I think that, I think if you lined up any one of these cars against like period competition, you'd be like, why is this car continually lapping the other cars on
Right.
the track? But but yeah, so like the idea of commissioning a $1 million perfect replica of your car so that you don't risk damaging your other $50 million car is really relatable to me.
Well, it makes sense. I mean,
Yeah.
if you got money to burn, like, and why would you risk that, this priceless kind of, you know, heirloom, irreplaceable thing?
Johnny Lieberman said, and he may have taken this from somebody else, but his quote was, Monterey is real cars and fake racing. Goodwood is fake cars and real racing.
That's good.
It kind of makes sense, like, if everyone's cheating a little bit, but no one to the degree that it's, like, disruptive to the spectacle of a good race. Like, everyone's cheating enough to make it a good race, then, like, maybe that's part of the appeal, is, like, it's good racing out there. Everyone is cheating, like, just enough to be competitive with each other out in the good
Yeah.
race. That seems like,
I
Yeah.
I personally love cheating, and cheating is like one of the major appealing things in motorsports to me is like how people cheat.
yeah.
Uh, but I don't want to see I don't want to see a guy hit 39 home runs. I want to see a guy hit 80 home runs. Like I want to see what is possible if we let everybody run absolutely wild. And like that's what you love about Can-Am, that's what you love about to a degree like Formula One or whatever. But it's like I want everybody to cheat. I want everybody to waste as much of their money and time on the shit as possible. And like, I want to see the cars going really fast. Like, I don't want to see the period cars on period tires like tootling around. I want to see them like, I want to be scared.
Yeah, dude, it's like what was I think was Dan Gurney was like driving a car at the limit is hard and it should look hard. Like
Yeah,
driving like it should look crazy. You should be scared that they're all gonna fucking hit each other in the wall and whatever.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think that's the appeal. Like, I mean, that's what makes it different. It's like you go to Goodwood, and like I said, you go to the Monterey Historics or whatever you see, and like some guys go fast at the Historics, and like those cars are obviously very fast and they're set up and like whatever, but there's nothing as far as a vintage racing on track product, and maybe like as far as a racing product, period. There's
Yeah.
nothing like revival. I mean, there's just nothing, and to Peter's earlier point too, like watching a car work and watching the suspension work and the body roll and watching the driver like physically pitch the car into a turn is like it's like that's if you're a moron like me, you watch Formula One and it's like all these little minute.
Well, yeah, no, exactly. When they show the in-car cameras of those guys, I mean, they're 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 sawing at the
Yeah,
wheel. I mean, it's like they're not making minute corrections. They are like arm over arm, like trying to keep this car from spinning around backwards.
That's
I
some
mean,
good
it's
shit.
so freaking crazy.
yeah,
It's so hairy.
yeah. It's very wild, and it's like I said, it's just like there's more vintage racing for me to see. I think I haven't been to a lot of other European vintage races, so maybe it's like that everywhere, but
Yeah.
um, it is, yeah, it's wild, and it's so I don't know. Like I said, it's easy to hate it. It's easy to be like, I don't want to put a fucking trilby on or whatever, but I do I do want to go back and wear like a period Soviet officer's uniform.
There you go.
People have been kicked out for wearing the other
Uh-huh. Yeah.
notable army
Yeah.
regalia there.
Good. Thank God.
People have been kicked out for
That'd be like the Max Mosley or
yeah, he wouldn't get kicked out. But for the Hugo Boss stuff, I think you can get sent home and asked to change. Um, but I think they'd have to let you wear a Red Army thing. I think they'd have to let you probably wear. Um, there's probably a number of like more obscure ally type uniforms that I think you could get away with.
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Although I don't know, maybe that'd be rude to do if you're like hosted by an automaker to show up in like the hat, you know.
Hey, listen,
And then,
it's like cheating in racing. They have to write the rule. You break it, but then they can
Yeah.
write it into the rules. But you can point and say like, no one said I couldn't.
you know, the thing then would be fun to be like, you know, who really won the war, right?
Yeah,
Was
you
not
know
the
who
British.
really liberated the fucking camps? Guess what? Guess
Yeah.
what? Guess what? Guess what?
My big joke. We stayed at
As you drive away in your in your Lada
your lot.
race car.
yeah. We stayed at this really incredible hotel in London that used to be the old War Office,
Mhm.
where they planned the war, and Churchill's office was there, and all that stuff. Both World Wars, just an incredible building. Another place where it's like, to quote my friend Frank, who's making the exhaust for my car right now, it's a place you walk into and you feel like a virus. Like
Hmm.
I should not be here.
Right. Yeah.
But we're in this hotel, and we got this tour from this really earnest one of the managers there. He's a young British kid, and he was telling us about all the spies who were there and like Churchill and all that stuff. And there was a pause in the conversation, and I said, you know, I always forget about the world wars. And the look on his face was absolute like horror. Like, it's like, of course you don't forget about it, especially in Britain. It's like all anybody ever wants to talk about. But it's so funny to just be like, yeah, I guess I do remember them technically that something happened, but the details of it just kind of washes together with Vietnam and everything else that happened, the Civil War. It's all kind of the same thing to me. But I kept making that joke throughout the weekend. And
That's a good bit. That's a really good bit.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's just like I know something big happened, but the details are just like I know there was was there an airplane or a tank maybe? Some
I
stuff
like it.
happened, I know. But
Yeah. So what was that? What was that all about anyway?
yeah. Was that the Boers? Is that right? Did you guys do something to India? Is that what happened? There was
Is that the
maybe?
is that the thing that happened to your empire?
I remember you had a bunch of colonies, and then obviously you don't now. Was this the thing that happened that made that not the case? They love talking about that.
Oh man. Well, cool. Yeah.
Are we at time? You want to wrap it up?
Maybe. I mean, that feels like an hour. That feels like a podcast.
Yeah.
We I guess we should also figure out kind of like what our sign on and sign off kind of procedures formally are going to be. Like, are you two going to kind of like introduce yourselves to a degree for the listeners at home? Are we going to do like
I think we should do that next time.
Yeah.
But maybe this time we can just say that you've been listening to a podcast called Tired. It's the car podcast for people who understand that cars are bad. And yeah, my name is Peter, and who else?
Rory.
Who else is here? Rory. And who else?
One more. Come on.
it's me, Maddie, on the ones and twos.
Peter Hughes, Rory Carroll, and Matthew Riley. And we're gonna do this some more.
You can do it. Try to do it a couple times a week, and talk about why cars, despite being so wonderful, are also so terrible.
Just
I would say I would flip that because I feel like it's understood that cars are bad, and I think we should point out that despite how terrible they are, that I mean I feel like it's we're I mean this is our way of kind of resolving this contradiction for ourselves.
we're resolving the dialectic about cars.
Yes.
The contradictions inherent in cars are being heightened.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But we'll talk more about that next time. Yeah. Oh, and I think our sign off should just be stay tired.
No problem.
On it, boss. Yeah.
That's good.
Cool.
Cool.
Sick.